Hello, and welcome to the Boost Over Ball podcast.
Dude, it's astounding to me that even at the very highest levels of Rocket League, somebody can still be that much better, that they can just dominate like First Color is doing.
Yeah. It's crazy.
But it's got to be, he can't always be that way because they're not, winning everything, but still.
Yeah. But, Binky, we were just talking roster moves, like just for NA, because NA happened this week.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 roster, like transfer players,
that's nuts.
Coming from other regions. And
not including the entire teams, right?
No, I counted Furia as one. Apparently Jack.
Okay, yeah.
And apparently Jack and Nolly both are. Dignitas picked up an NA team. Luminosity picked up an NA team. Complexity moved CRR from Spain to Florida so he could compete with Complexity. I mean, it's crazy.
It is crazy. Whole lot of movement.
Brand new team altogether, because do you think Gen G Mobile 1 would have, if Appjack and Nolly didn't come over, would Gen G still have been created? Like, what's the story behind how these teams get created? I don't really know this stuff, so I'm curious if you do.
I mean, from what I've heard from like Lawler's videos and stuff, is Dignitas dropped their roster. Nolly was gonna get like dropped by Carmine Corps, which was like Nolly, Astral, and they did pretty decently well at Worlds, but Dignitas dropped their roster, which was apparently Jack Joria's and Scrubkilla, and I know apparently Jack and Nolly are friends outside of Rocket League, and so the two of them I think were looking to find a team. And Gen G said, hey, we'll sponsor your region transfer if you come to Canada. They're in Toronto now and play for us. And they said, okay, done. And so they moved to Toronto about 4 weeks ago and created, Gen G Mobile 1.
Good move.
I think so. They good showing, especially in their first, event as a team, getting second place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Second place is only
phase.
Yeah. Second place and the only team that took them was FaZe.
Yeah. True.
And then, they also, in addition to all the roster changes, they also revamped the format for RLCS, where they split it up into fall, winter, and spring. Each of those kind of, seasons of the main season are split up into an open, an invitational, a cup, and then an international major, with the fall international major already being announced as being in Amsterdam this year.
Oh,
that's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
It'd be so fun to go to
a trip. Yeah, let's go.
No, I can't.
I know I can't.
I would if I could.
Yeah, no, we just need to make the podcast big so that we can get those VIP passes for next Worlds.
Yeah, exactly.
The whole reason behind this podcast is so that way we can do some international travel and watch Rocket League.
So I can somewhat justify it, exactly.
Exactly. Tax breaks. I can write it off now.
Oh yeah, there we go.
Are people thinking it's going to be EU for Worlds this season?
That would be my guess, because it was just NA. But with the growth of the other regions, I maybe could see it being in Asia.
That would be cool.
But I mean, I can't. I think MENA would love to have it, but I think that that's a little bit. It gets a little bit political there.
Yeah, I could see that.
Because almost everybody besides like one or two players in MENA in the top 16 are Saudi Arabian. And think what you will, each their own, but that's a pretty politically charged area.
For sure.
So my guess would be Europe. I think maybe like a France would probably be pretty good because French Rocket League players are nuts, like Vatira. And well, I guess we'll have to wait and find out because I think the U.S. is bound to get at least one international major at least. Because it's a huge part of their fan base, especially with so many like tier 1 organizations coming to or already being in North America. I feel like they have to get at least one.
I'm just holding out for that Minnesota regional, the major.
Yeah, I mean, the more I think about it, right? They've done LA, they've done Dallas, they've done like New York, New Jersey. So like you got to think like maybe Minneapolis, maybe Chicago,
Seattle next,
maybe Seattle.
Yeah, like there's places to do it.
I mean, I know Seattle had the international for Dota 2. I think like 2 years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
that'd be cool.
Which was a pretty big deal. So I mean, I there's a couple of major cities that I think would be, good option. I think Seattle's certainly a good option. I think the Midwest is pretty good too. It's pretty central for everybody.
Yeah.
Right. So like if East Coast people or West Coast people wanted to come, it wouldn't be, too
far. It's not too far for anybody.
Right. I maybe could see like a Toronto.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. But I guess we'll have to wait and see.
We will. Yeah. What do you think? So, who are we excited about in, what is it, next weekend? We got Europe, South America, and honestly,
Sub-Saharan Africa, I believe, is also next week.
Yeah, SSA, yeah. SSA, SAM, Oceania, and EU next weekend.
Oh, yeah.
Moist.
Yeah, I mean, it's the first event for the new Moist roster with Joyo, Rise, and Astral after Vatira left for Carmine Corp.
They played at some point like Thursday or Friday. I don't remember when it was.
Yeah, there was a small like invitational tournament.
Yeah, okay. It seemed like they were like not nearly as comfortable at the start, but it seemed like they picked up as they played more. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly going to be interesting because Astral is a very specific kind of player, extremely mechanical, really, really like high pop-off potential, but I've seen some series where he's just like invisible.
Weird.
But, I'm excited to see if BDS is still dominant or if anything changed over, what has been a couple months.
Yeah, if they can pick up where they left off. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, God, they were so they were absolutely dominant at Worlds.
Yeah, that was crazy.
What's Monkeys? I'm looking at the people that are going to be in the thing next weekend.
And it's Arju, who used to play with Cuxier and Speed on Team Liquid. Metane, who's kind of played with Arju quite a lot, and I have not gotten to see Smokies play yet. But I'm super excited for Team Solary. I don't know how well they'll do, but it's KDOP, Fairy Peak, and Chaussette.
Oh, they played Moist.
Oh, did they? I didn't.
And I think they were doing really well.
I mean, KDOP and Fairy Peak are kind of icons in the scene for a while. They're getting up there. I've always been a big Chaussette fan, even back to like when he played at PSG. But I mean, it's an all French team. The French, they like their Rocket League in France. I mean, Carmine Corp is exotic, and Vatira too, French players. BDS is all French.
Oh, are they?
Yeah, BDS, Monkey Moon Extra, Seiko, and even their coach Mew is all French.
Oh, interesting.
Which, now that I'm thinking about it, is maybe why they dropped Mark by 8. Because he's Spanish.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense.
And Mark by 8 moved to G1, which is Mark by 8, Atomic, and Dorito.
Is that G2's predecessor?
Probably.
I was wondering the exact same thing.
Oh man.
Yeah, obviously, Cube here knows everything about everything when it comes to this stuff. That's crazy.
Speaking of which, I didn't get up to the Mall of America to watch the college tournament. That was gonna be awesome.
Yeah, that would have been cool.
Yeah, it's too much driving right now.
Yeah, I mean, and I coach a college team, so I feel like I have to stay plugged in as much as possible because even the kids that I coach are they watch it a lot, so I gotta stay relevant somehow.
Makes sense.
Especially being old and bad at Rocket League, I have to have some redeeming qualities. And knowing how to Google and follow people on Twitter may be one of them.
Wait. If you're old and bad at Rocket League, and to stay relevant, you have to stay in tune. And I'm old and bad at Rocket League, and I still have no idea what's going on. Are you saying I have no redeeming qualities?
No, you're here for your looks. You're the eye candy.
Oh, wait, thank you. That's why I'm so happy that the podcast has no video.
We got the capability to turn cams on right now.
And we could. It could happen.
It could happen. We'll consider it. Listen, my looks will fade.
Oh well.
Man, this is honestly, for the start of the season, and this is me talking like I've ever watched the start of a season before, but for the start of the season, this is off to a good start. This was some really exciting stuff to watch. The bit I caught most of it, I think, but
yeah, I mean, I was kind of expecting it to be a little bit more like preseason football. So, like, with so many roster changes and new teams, thought it would be a little bit sloppy. And there's always some good plays because there always is. But for the most part, this was a lot higher of a level of Rocket League than I anticipated seeing originally. But I guess moving into the event, like, they introduced the Swiss bracket for World Championships last year, and they've decided that they're going to stick with it for all of their events for this season. How do you guys feel about the Swiss stage or the Swiss bracket?
I actually got to bail. Someone just showed up at my house.
Okay.
Sorry. See you guys.
See ya.
That's how he feels about Swiss brackets.
Exactly.
All right, from now on, we need to ask him about Swiss brackets every episode, and he needs to leave.
Oh yeah.
We just need to keep that recurring.
Oh yeah.
Well, we talked about it a little bit before. I am absolutely in love with the Swiss brackets. For one, it does give us a lot more games to watch. It also kind of like self heals isn't the word I'm looking for. It balances itself. So as the event moves on, it balances itself out. So if you have a very dominant team like G2 showed this time around, and they just win their first 3 games, they are now no longer just beating up everybody else. So like as you get further along in the Swiss, it kind of just leads itself to being that you're going to have closer and closer games. I can't imagine very often in the Swiss we're going to see those last couple games for the Open be just complete shutouts. And I like that. I don't, watching a shutout's great and everything like that, but like as I learned at Worlds, it's not much fun. It's much more fun to watch, Jans put in a goal like 1 second left in game 5 to beat Moist, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Like that was absolutely a just insane moment, and it's not if it's 4-0.
No kidding. But I mean, I like they definitely do a great job with the Swiss bracket. I like the tiebreaker, which is like your game differential, is a super easy thing to explain to people to understand. So G2 went 3-0 in their series, and so did Space Station. But in G2's run, they only dropped 1 game. They beat Luminosity 3-0. They beat Pittsburgh Knights 3-0, and they beat FaZe 3-1. So their game differential is +8 because they won 9 and lost 1. Space Station, on the other hand, beat Seoul 3-0. They beat Furia 3-1, and they beat Shopify Rebellion 3-1. So that's 9 wins to 2 losses. So their game differential is +7. So Space Station loses out on the tiebreaker, but it's very easy. I believe the old tiebreaker for RLCS was goals for, which can be a good measure, but also, I mean, if you have a series where it's like 2-1, 1-0, 3-0, and then all of a sudden you have a game where it's like 7-2, like, you know, just something went wrong, or they, you know, the other team's trying something different, like throwing caution to the wind to try and get back into it, that can kind of skew your data. I mean, I'm sure you've had games where it's close for all of the games, then all of a sudden one game just, you know, when somebody pops off.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's pretty much how Rocket League works.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, and in the end of the day, the only thing that matters is did you win or lose, right? And I like that because, you know, if you have a really good game or you have a really bad game, like the number of goals in that game doesn't really matter. What matters is did you win or did you lose?
Yeah, for sure.
Kind of the same thing that like we talk about when we're trying to explain to some of our, you know, in our league, when we try to explain to some of the newer folks that are all like, you know, how do I get better? And it's like, get scored on less.
Yeah.
The team who wins the one that gets the most balls in the net, like whatever it takes to get there. And so like it's, I mean, obviously it's a lot more complicated than that when you have people who can fly around and do the stuff the first killer does, but it's very straightforward. It's very simple. At first, I will say, the Swiss stage thing confused the heck out of me, but now that our second event with it, it's so much easier. But I didn't understand it at all at first. I was like, what determines where they go? It's easy. As soon as you get to 3 wins, you're done.
Yeah, and as soon as you get to 3 losses, you're out.
Yeah, it's like that is actually really nice. That's even more chances than you get in most any other format. Usually it's like 2 losses, you're done.
Yeah, I mean, you're at least, so if you're, you know, unfortunately this week Rogue drops in 3 straight series, and so if you're a Rogue fan, you're happy because you at least get to see 3 series, where, you know, in the previous formats you get 2. It gets double elimination and then they're done.
Yeah.
But I mean, it works. Like, I think that the graphic that Psyonix and Epic put out about the Swiss bracket was a little bit confusing at first, based on like who plays who and when. But like, basically, it boils down to, if you win, you play another team that won, and you just keep going, right? So you play someone with the same record as you. So like, I'll use G2 for instance, right? So their first round matchup was against Luminosity. They beat Luminosity, and so then they play Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh beat Optic in their first game. And it's based on the game differential, right? So they do like the first seed plays the 7th seed, and so on and so forth. And so Pittsburgh had the worst game differential, beating Optic in 5 games. And so they play them. And then, you know, they'll play FaZe in the 3rd round, and FaZe had won their first 2 round series. And then G2 won that series, and then they're in. And it's a similar path for Space Station. So you play teams with the same record as you until everyone has won 3 games or lost 3 games.
Yes.
That was a little bit more complicated than it needed to be, but...
No, I mean, and that's why at first, when you first see the Swiss format, it's just like, this is overwhelming and confusing. Why can't I have my pretty little lines? Okay, you win, you lose, you go up or down. But, you know, this is way better for the fans. This is way better for all the fans. This is way better for the people who like watching Rocket League. Honestly, I think it's probably better for RLCS also, because more games, more time on screen is more money, really.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think this Swiss format is just a absolutely fantastic thing to happen. And it looks like they're just running with it. It looks like, I think, aren't each of the events now Swiss?
Yes, they are.
And I love Rocket League. I cannot wait to watch all of this Rocket League.
For sure. I mean, it even, like, from a business perspective too, it just makes sense, right? Because it's more Rocket League, right? So it's more subscriptions on Twitch if it's a remote event. It's more sponsors that they get, video ads that they can show. And, because ultimately, even if you're a fan of the game and a fan of the esport, you want them to make as much money as possible. So the prize pools get bigger, so more people get into the game, so it becomes bigger, so they have more resources, so they can get bigger venues and do cooler things. So it's exciting not only as a fan, but for the competition level, but also for the growth of the esport in general.
Yes, and like that's the thing that I'm finding very fascinating about Rocket League, is that it still has so much room to grow. I feel like it still has a lot more growing than the reverse to do, because it feels like I don't know the exact numbers. I'm not paying that close of attention. Maybe I should, but maybe I will. Who knows? I don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow. but but at the end of the day, it does feel like Rocket League, the esport, is gaining traction. Rocket League itself, I don't know. I know that we caught a huge number of players when it first went free to play, and that seems to have died off, which is fine, because a lot of people jump into Rocket League and go, "Ooh, yay, car soccer," and then they realize, "Oh, it's hard," and leave. But other people like us hate ourselves and continue doing it anyway.
Oh yeah. But I mean, yeah, like you said, I think there's a lot of room for growth, and I think that they're poised for more growth than decline. So I'm excited to kind of see, especially this season, now that, I know there's a lot of Team Luminosity fans in North America that now are getting a team back in North America. I know that there's a lot of Dignitas fans who are getting a team. I know a lot of people from the World Championships kind of became Furia fans.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of Moist Critical and Moist fans. So I'm excited to see as, people from other games continue to find and learn more about Rocket League.
Yeah, Furia to NA, even though, as I said, I read it a bunch of times and you had mentioned it a bunch of times, it didn't actually hit me until, like, I don't know, the 47th time you said it. I am so excited by that because, yeah, I was one of those people that I became a Furia fan big time at Worlds. They're so much fun to watch. And Yan?
Yeah, usually.
Yan is just, he's so dominant. He reminds me a lot of First Killer, just from watching them play. I mean, I don't know about the specific style, like, I'm practically a bronze, so don't think that I actually understand
No.
what they're doing. But but in watching them, he's very dominant on the field. He seems to be their First Killer, and he seems to actually, when he's on, has as much of a impact on the games he's in. I don't know what happened this Open though, because I didn't catch many of their games, or any of their games. I'm not sure. I don't think I caught any of their games, but I'm excited to watch more Furia. That's for dang sure.
Yeah, I mean, it also opens up some more spaces for different SAM teams to make it to the international majors and to the World Championships, because you take an absolutely dominant team out of a region, and that leaves a space behind them.
So here's a question for you, since you know these things pretty deeply. We have these 16 teams that made it to this Open,
Yeah.
And what's the path that a team takes to get to an Open? Do you know?
The teams that do well in the top 16 qualifier qualifies to the Fall Open. So in the top 16, anybody in the top 8 qualified for the Fall Open, and anybody from 9th to 16th had to move to the closed qualifier.
Got it.
And then anybody from the Open qualifier who finished above 8th qualified for the closed qualifier.
So I'm clicking around with Wikipedia and I'm finding these things as you talk about them, and I'm seeing a bit more what you're talking about.
Yeah, so it's going to take 8 teams from the top 16 that are directly qualified into the Open, and then it'll be the top 8 teams from the closed qualifier that'll qualify directly into the Open as well. And so you're basically allowing, a random team that doesn't have any organizational sponsor or anything to just play out of their minds, and they could qualify for an Open, which is good for the growth of the esport.
This whole thing's been so great, honestly, and just going to Worlds, like, I don't know, I kind of wish I had been paying attention to this stuff a little bit longer, because it's very, very cool. But
I mean, it's kind of overwhelming too to try and keep up with everything, like especially if you're jumping in for the first time. But I don't know, like once you kind of know most of the big names, it kind of sorts itself out, right? So it's easier to follow if you have like a baseline knowledge, and so being able to go to Worlds and to have some of that experience and to see what it's like is beyond cool. And quite frankly, that was one of my reasons for wanting to do the podcast, right? So it's easy to keep up with things if you don't have to watch anything. Most of it's on YouTube, but there's not really anybody doing a big podcast.
I know, absolutely. There really isn't a ongoing podcast by any means. So it's kind of like, I was thinking about that before we met today. I was like, usually when you start something like this, like, I'm doing this as for fun, to hang out with friends and chat about Rocket League and enjoy this game that I love, right? In a different way. But there's also, like, if you are looking at building something like a podcast, you usually want to take a look at, it's kind of like starting a business. You take a look at the market, see what is missing, what is needed, how can you give back to a community, what can you build that is going to bring value. And I've been thinking about that quite a bit about this podcast, and I feel like there's a lot of room there. I mean, granted, there's not much room for sitting and talking about like play-by-play. RLCS has that well covered with their broadcasts. Doing professional commentation, sure, but entertaining conversation or having we should find some
two idiots in their basement talking about what we think about Rocket League.
Yes, as if we know what we're talking about. I think there's a big market for this.
I mean,
no, I would love to have I would love to have a segment where we take some of the members of MLE, our lowest, like our golds and stuff, and have them do replay review on a pro game.
Yeah, no,
I just want to see. I just want to see what it looks like to a different, because what I'm watching when I was watching Worlds. I was sitting next to you for part of it. I was sitting next to Water for part of it. I sat next to Raspberries. And, like, you guys are way better than me. I'm sitting, like, champ 1, right? And that's if I'm on a good day. And so the game that I am watching is different than the game you are watching. Even though we are both sitting in the same place watching the same game, it's different. Like, you understand the button pushes and the precision needed to pull some of this stuff off at a much deeper level than I do. And I think that's part of what gives Rocket League its value to the esports community and to everybody, is just that, like, there really is not a top to the skill curve in this game.
Yeah, because, people certainly haven't found it yet. They're still learning new mechanics are still being discovered.
Yeah. So
it's crazy. It's awesome too, because I mean, I am by no means a pro player, but I'm able to, compete through my players in a higher level than I do personally. But, like the average Rocket League player is a Plat 2. Like, that's like the median average Rocket League player. And so there's all different kinds of avenues for you to stay engaged and to enjoy Rocket League if it's not playing at a high level.
More every day, because I think that it's taking some time. It's been taking a bit longer than I would like for the recognition that esports deserves, as far as it is a legitimate and real career path, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, because of the way that the world works, a lot of places are slow to realize there's money in it.
Yeah. I
But
mean,
now people are waking up. They're like, there's money in this. And so, yes, more and more colleges are now looking for people to come and play video games for them.
yeah. But transitioning back to, our NA event,
Yes.
we, this weekend, the fall open, we had in the Swiss bracket, G2, Space Station, Gen G, FaZe Clan, Shopify Rebellion, Version 1, Furia, and Optic qualifying for the playoff, and NRG, Complexity, Pittsburgh Knights, Team Axel, Dignitas, Soul, Luminosity Gaming, and Rogue being eliminated in the Swiss stage. So I think the biggest thing that sticks out to me is what's going on with NRG.
After seeing them at Worlds, and as I said in the past, like I'm new to all this esports stuff, but NRG are names that I even recognize. You got Squishy, you got Garrett G, Justin, those are names I even recognize, right?
Yeah.
And they've been around for a long time. They're very, very, very good. I think Garrett G has been around since 2017. So he's been around a while, pretty much as long as you can be in the esport. And I don't think they're done yet. I don't think they're done yet by a long shot. But as you were saying before, I think what they're running into is they were reliant on being just better than everybody because it's Squishy and it's Justin, and like Justin is Justin was first killer back in his prime, and I don't know if he still is. I don't know if he still is like that much better than people, but that's kind of the point. Is at one point Justin was just that much better than everybody, and the rest of the meta caught up to him, and so they need to mature, honestly, which is weird to say because they are as old as they are. That's from my perspective. That's really what's holding them back. Is just that they're not performing, not because they're being out mechanicked or out skilled or really outsped. They're just not. They're just expecting. I guess would it be fair to say they just don't respect their opponents the way that they need to?
Maybe, or I kind of think of it more as they haven't adapted, right? So there was an interview with Garrett a little bit ago he basically said, up until this season they hadn't really done any like game planning or like strategy sessions like other teams do to prepare. They kind of just relied on their talent to beat people, and it had worked for them up to that point. They were one of the most dominant teams in the region for a long time, even before they picked up Squishy, when they had Turbo and they won a world championship. But this season there was a bigger focus from Garrett and from Justin and Squishy about wanting to kind of put a plan in place to try and not rely on their skill, because especially at Worlds, their plan was, have Justin pop off so we can win games. And it just didn't happen, and it still hasn't happened yet, this season. This being the first event, but they got close. They had 2 wins, and, they needed 3 to qualify, but they just didn't. So I think it's certainly a work in progress. I think they can come back from it, but it's going to be a long road, because if you're looking at the people that qualified for, the playoff, there's not a lot of teams, I think, that are going to, take a step back other than maybe Shopify Rebellion, but they looked really good.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of hopeful to hear that they are aware that they need to do more than just rely on their skill, and that they're trying to make that transition to be more strategic. And yet, yeah, they didn't qualify, but they barely didn't qualify, right? They took Furia to Game 5 and lost.
Yeah. They took Dignitas to Game 5 in Round 1. They took Furia to Game 5 in Round 5 and lost them both.
So, yeah, they didn't make it, but it was like they barely didn't make it. And that's actually kind of that gives me a bit of an optimistic look on them then, because if they're just now starting to try and learn how to do this strategizing and like really being thoughtful about their gameplay ahead of time, then this could just be growing pains.
Oh, for sure.
I'll be very excited to see how they perform in the next event.
Yeah, as they bounce back, I think the Fall Cup is the next event that they will have to compete in. I think they'll have to go through the qualifiers again, but I think that, like you said, I think it's growing pains. I think they can do a good job, and I hope for their sake and for the region's sake as a whole that they can bounce back in a big way.
Yeah. Well, and another one that I kind of want to talk about a bit is Dignitas themselves, right? So if you look at Dignitas, they did not perform very well. Just if you look at just their win-loss, right? But if you look at their actual games, they went to Game 5 3 out of the 4 times that they played.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on Dignitas?
I mean, it just like they're one of the many teams that are brand new coming into this season. They were better than I thought that they would be, but they it's a brand new roster. There's gonna be some growing pains there. That team is Delta, Andy, and Drees. And so some people may know Drees. He was the sub for G2 and played for Rizzo when Rizzo announced that he was going to retire. He then played for Optic and Envy. So he went from G2 to Envy to Optic and now Dignitas. And so they're one of the many teams that we talked about in our Roster Mania part that I think will have some growing pains and will have to try to find some extra moments of magic to qualify for things, because I mean, just with Furia coming in, with Optic reforming into a championship quality roster, in my opinion, and FaZe looking as good as they have, I think it's going to be harder and harder for some of these teams on the bubble to break into the events.
So, what do you think which team do you think is most undervalued right now, or somehow did not show up the way that you believe that they should, and it was just a fluke? Do you think any of these in the bottom 8 here fit that description?
I think that Complexity can fall into that category. They fall in Game 5 to Furia, and I mean, Furia is a top 4 world team. They're really, really good, but they've just transferred to North America. I think that Complexity bringing in CRR from Spain, it's a region transfer. I think that will take a little bit of time for them to kind of find their footing, but I mean, they all speak the same language. They speak Spanish. And I think that loss, the Complexity Gaming loss to Seoul, that's going to be where they're going to look back and say, we really could have qualified, but that's where we lost out. Because they're able to, that is the only game that they played that did not go to Game 5. They beat Rogue in 5, they beat Dignitas in 5, they lost to Furia in 5, and they lost to Optic in 5. So, I mean, they played everybody very, very close except for Seoul. They were only able to take one game, so I don't know if that's, they had a bad game plan, if Seoul just, had their number or what, but I think I think Complexity are a team that can try to push out of the bottom half of the region and fight for a spot in the playoffs moving forward.
Well, so if they were to fight out, that means that somebody up in the top 8 have to drop, right? That's just kind of the way it works. So who do you think they would be bumping out of the top 8?
They looked very good throughout the weekend, but I think that Shopify Rebellion are going to be the team that are going to drop out. I mean, they have some good players. People may know Memory from, he played for Kansas City Pioneers. He played for E United. He played for Ghost Gaming. He's a good player. They have Two Piece, who they just brought in from the Randoms, which was an unsponsored team. And they have Parth, who came from Top Leth, which was kind of another unsponsored team, but I mean, I think that they outperformed their stock this weekend. I think that they're capable of repeating, but if they're, in my eyes, the most likely team to fall out of the top 8.
All right. And yeah, I'm looking back through Complexity's basically their performance here, and yeah, I see exactly what you see, which is, from what I can tell from Seoul, they did not perform well, right? They went 0-3 against Space Station. They took one game off version 1, and they did go to game 5 against the Pittsburgh Knights, but I don't think the Pittsburgh Knights don't strike me. Is it Pittsburgh Knights?
Yeah, it is Pittsburgh Knights. Yep.
Yeah, they don't strike me as a top 8 team either. I mean, if you look at them going up against any of the other top 8 teams, the Knights, it was 0-3 by G2, 0-3 by NRG, 0-3 by version 1. But they beat Seoul. And Complexity did not. I really think that Complexity versus Seoul was a fluke. Nothing against Seoul, but they don't strike me, from just looking at the stats here, they don't strike me as somebody that should have won that game against Complexity. So I don't know, I wonder if it's either Seoul had a good game or Complexity had a bad game. But I think that's something we'll see, honestly, as the season goes forward, because that's kind of a thing. Like in MLE, it's kind of the thing we deal with too, is consistency. And I guess we'll see which of those teams becomes more consistent as the season moves on.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, I just found the game-by-game results for the Seoul and Complexity series, and it's Seoul won 2 games, 1-0. So they were all but game 1. It was a 2-goal game, but the rest of them are 1-goal games. I think that Complexity struggled to score against Seoul, and that's going to be the difference. Is Seoul were able to park the bus and prevent them from putting in any easy ones. But I mean, that's one where you got to be able to score to move forward.
Yeah. I mean, and even the other ones, they're all within 1 goal, right? So those were. I might have to go find those videos and actually watch them, because yeah, those are super close. We got 2-4 at Manfield, 3-2 to Aquadome, and then 0-1. So yeah, whenever I see a lot of 0-1s, it just makes me think that it could have gone either way, and it just happened to go, the direction of the person who got the 1.
Yeah. But on the flip side, I can't really say enough good things about G2 and Space Station. Is there? I mean, G2 dropped 1 game in 3 series. Space Station dropped 2 games in 3 series, and Space Station played Furia and dropped a game, and G2 played FaZe and dropped 1 game. So I mean, they just looked dominant throughout the Swiss stage. Was there anybody else that stuck out to you personally in the kind of the Swiss stage that you thought that they just played really well, or they looked really good?
Honestly, Gen G Mobile has been incredibly surprising. I mean, for a brand new team, for having been transfers, for everything that they are, for them to be able to not only qualify but go as far as they did, right? That is absolutely phenomenal. I think that being able to do that on your first showing, when you are and would be completely understandable. Honestly, I'd be completely understanding if they didn't even make it, right? If they didn't even make the Open, I would have been completely understanding, because of all of the uncertainty that is built into a brand new team and moving and everything else that they've had to do. But they look dominant, and kind of talking back to G2, like you said, like they're looking great. But I'm also seeing that if you look at the teams that they played, they did just go bam, 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 win, win, win. But they only played 1 top 4 team in the Swiss, and they lost a game from, and then FaZe took a game from them. But Luminosity just did not show up this event. And then Pittsburgh Knights we talked about, So I think that you're right, G2, great. Space Station, great. I would put Space Station above G2 just because they ran into Furia, right? And they won. And Furia has a special place in my heart. They're just badass.
That's fair. That's fair. All right.
But yeah, but Gen G definitely most impressive of this whole event.
Okay. And then we move into top 8, which is in this new format, the top 8 qualify for a single elimination playoff bracket, which is a little bit different than the double elimination style that we've done before. And so in that series, or in the playoff bracket, you have G2 beating Furia 4-2, FaZe Clan beating Shopify Rebellion 4-2, Space Station beating Optic 4-1, and Gen G Mobile 1 Racing beating Version 1 4-1. Was there anything that like really surprised you in the quarterfinals that you weren't expecting, or is there a series that you thought could have had the potential to be good and just wasn't?
I watched Space Station Optic because I like stories, and as I said, I went to Worlds not knowing anything about esports. I left Worlds I didn't leave Worlds a Space Station fan. I became a Space Station gaming fan during, and that's the only merch that I bought, right? I bought a shirt. I was wearing the cowboy hat. I went to their events. I was all for Space Station gaming. I was chanting, Laniel. I was really enjoying the energy of Space Station gaming. And while at Worlds, from my perspective, I thought Reddles was carrying that team. So when they dropped him, I was very upset. My heart was broken, and like I wanted to throw out the stuff that I had bought. Granted, I didn't because that's a waste of money. And also, there's a really cool shirt. I love Space Station's little spaceman. His little logo is so cool. So I was really, really, really looking forward to Optic and Space Station, that game, because it was the time for them to
the Reddles grudge match.
Yeah, the Reddles grudge match, and it was disappointing. Like I wanted a redemption arc, right? I wanted Reddles to get his vengeance in a lot of ways, because I don't, none of us actually know the full story there, but I feel like they did him very wrong, from my perspective, just because. But who knows? I've only been paying attention to this for a couple months, but yeah, and then they just absolutely dominated, and Space Station won my heart again a little bit more. So I'll gladly wear their stuff again, because they are absolutely impressive this so far. But I'm also really disappointed that Optic was not against them.
Yeah, that seems to be, at least in my opinion, that seemed to be kind of like the overall theme of the playoff, right? So Saturday in the playoff, you get we had 4 matches to play. And it seemed like, I don't know if it was the fact that, they hadn't really done very much leading up to it, but it seemed every series kind of fell flat. We didn't have one series that went the distance to honestly, make it to Game 7 or anything. Furia took 2 games off G2, Shopify took 2 games off FaZe, but then Optic and V1, after the Swiss stage, Optic looked pretty good, and then Version 1 coming off of a good performance at Worlds last year, they looked to build off of all the positive things that happened to them. You kind of expected them to do a little bit better coming into the playoff, but only able to take 1 game. Just kind of a little bit underwhelming.
Yeah, well, also though, to be fair to Version 1, they had to go up against Gen G, right? Because if you look, like Space Station, absolutely dominant against Optic, and dominant in the Swiss. They go up against Gen G and just get destroyed, right? So Gen G, I think that, honestly, if you look back through the way that this whole Open played out, I think that FaZe and Gen G was basically destined to be the final, just from how all these teams were playing. So yeah. I don't fault Version 1 for not making it past the quarterfinals, but like you were saying, like it was a little bit disappointing that once we got out of Swiss, all of these games, all these series were pretty one-sided.
Yeah, moving into the semifinals, G2 takes 1 game off of FaZe Clan, and Space Station's only able to take 1 game off of Gen G. Albeit, the Space Station Gen G series, in my opinion, was a lot closer than the G2 one. But Space Station lost, an overtime game, a 1-goal game to Gen G, where they probably could have taken 2 of those games. But I mean, Gen G does a great job of being able to finish out the series, and they looked really, really good coming in today, the final day.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the Space Station Gen G series it did feel much closer. I'm looking at the scoreline, and it doesn't look like it was that close, especially the last 2 games. But I think SSG does have that problem. Daniel's real young. Arsenal is a bit. I don't know enough about all that, but from my impression, he seems to be a bit tiltable, and like by game 4, they just kind of fell apart. Like, 1-4, and then the final game was 0-4. Gen G just kept up the pressure, and SSG kind of fell apart, which is somewhat along the lines of what I'm kind of used to seeing with Space Station, which is Space Station is very aggressive. They're very used to being the aggressor, and as soon as as soon as their nose gets a little bloody, they kind of fall apart.
Yeah, I mean, I will be interested to see. I will be interested to see how SSG is able to bounce back and try to play better next time, because they certainly did not have a good showing against Gen G.
But also I would not have called FaZe doing the same thing to Gen G. Basically, that grand final I expected to be a lot closer. So I don't know. This whole open was so much fun, and it was great to watch. But it was also it was a lot of one-sided matches.
Yeah, and that brings us to our grand final of FaZe and Gen G, in which FaZe took it 4-1, similar to both of our semifinal matches.
And not even like, they were very dominant 4-1. I watched those, and it was dominant, right? FaZe was just looking so good, and I don't know how Gen G fell apart, but yeah, they just didn't show up in the same way.
And I mean, I'm a little bit curious as to, was it Gen G not performing as well as they had in the series before, or was it just FaZe Clan being just that good?
From my perspective, from what I saw, I would say it was FaZe just being that good. Firstkiller was having the event of his life.
He was that guy.
He started. I didn't catch the Shopify match, and I didn't catch them playing in the Swiss. I don't really pay attention that much to FaZe. I am going to now for sure, but I watched the G2 FaZe series, and Firstkiller just dominated that series, and then he did again in the final. So like, I don't know if it was Gen G not showing up as much as it was Firstkiller just being on a completely different level.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly they played incredibly well, and I can't say enough good things about FaZe Clan. They did a good job taking the series and taking the event. But the only thing I would like to point out about that is, this is now the second year in a row that FaZe Clan have won the first event of the year. They did the same thing last year, and in my opinion, they kind of fell off. That was kind of their peak, and they fell off as the season went along. So for them, I'm sure they're quite hopeful that they will do better. And so from that aspect, I hope that they can, kind of keep up the momentum that they've had thus far.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, they're very fun to watch, and I look at most of this stuff from a perspective of from my own perspective, which I'm not very in tune with all the pro scene. I just like to watch Rocket League. I like to play and pretend that maybe one day I'll grow up and be as good as them. But they're very fun to watch. And like, Firstkiller moves his car in ways that like I didn't know was possible. So that's fun. But yeah, I hope that they don't fall off. But if they do, then great. More room for other people at the top.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly if my team's not going to win, I'm certainly going to root for Team Chaos. So I totally get it.
Which one's your team? Which team do you want?
I am a big Space Station fan, as are you. I like Arsenal a lot. I think that he plays in such a way that is very unusual. He goes for a lot of demos. He's hyper aggressive, and it works for them. They've kind of built their play style around that, and I think that the pickup of LJ is just going to elevate them that much more because he's a very good third man player. So I'm excited to see what they do. I'm excited, quite frankly, to see some good Rocket League. I mean, there's some tremendous teams in NA now. Furia has moved into NA. I'm excited for that. I think V1 really picked it up towards Worlds last year, and they kind of found their groove. I'm still a big Reddles fan. I thought that he was an excellent fit on Space Station before that whole thing happened. And, quite frankly, I'm excited to see if NRG can recover or if they're going to have to make roster changes after the fall split. But we will certainly see what happens there.
Yeah, do you think that we're going to see another roster mania in the fall split?
I do. I think that very quickly, at least from what we've seen so far, I think that the teams that are sitting in the top 8, which I think will be pretty similar to how we got today, will kind of stand pat, and the teams that are not in the top 8 will look to make changes to try and scrape into the top 8. So I will be interested to see what happens with that, but I think we will know a lot more after the fall major.
For you. Just a little side question, I guess. Is there a fantasy league for this?
There is.
Oh my god, we should do a fantasy league, because I was just about to ask, okay, so you think roster changes. What roster changes would you make?
It's gonna depend a little bit on the standings, but I could see a team, like if Dignitas is on the outside looking in, I could see them making a move. I think that Pittsburgh Knights could be in a position to make a move. Kind of any of the tier 1 organizations that you see competing in other esports, I think would look to make a move just because they have the resources to do so.
Okay.
But it'll certainly be interesting to see, because I think that any of the teams in the top 8, I don't know that they will make any moves, but I think that the bottom 8 will kind of pick each other apart, so to speak, about trying to make some changes to help propel their roster forward.
Well, it's getting late for me. Let's. I think we've done a lot of talking, a lot of Rocket Leaguing.
Yeah. Well, I'll do a quick wrap up here from MENA from the Middle East. KRN wins their Open, which is Killers, RW9, and Nader. They beat Team Falcons in the grand final 4-2. They had swept Falcons in the Swiss round, and Falcons just did not look very good against them. So hopefully they can look to rebound. I know a lot of people from NA really like the Falcons. They like Khalid and TRK and Ahmed, so hopefully they can do better. And then in Asia Pacific, we have the winner of the team being James Cheese. It's a non-sponsored team. It's a region transfer team. It has Kami, formerly of Renegades and OCE, Virtuoso from EU, and Realize, who is actually from Japan. The team has relocated to Seoul, and they had a comprehensive win. They only dropped one match in their entire run to winning, and that was in the Swiss stage. And they 4-0 swept the quarterfinals, the semifinals, and the finals. So they will certainly look to be a dominant team in the Asia Pacific region.
I see that as well. I do have. I was looking through and looking at these different numbers, and I see that Detonator was also pretty dominant up until they ran into James Cheese. And I was thinking that there might be something interesting with the Detonator and Tough Love, because Tough Love took 3 games off them in the quarterfinals, but nothing is showing nearly as dominant in that region as James Cheese.
I still laugh every time I hear it's a good name. But yeah, I mean it's a smaller region. I mean, certainly not in terms of people, but in terms of Rocket League popularity. But I think that there's a lot of reason to be optimistic for them. Like you said, I think Gladiators were able to make Worlds last year, and they looked pretty good up until they came into contact with James Cheese. They have Pulse. They have OSM, which a lot of people may know. And then Detonator is kind of really, those are kind of your top three with 3 Japanese players there. But I definitely think that it was a comprehensive victory for James Cheese, and they will. I kind of don't really see that changing anytime soon.
Yeah, what's really interesting is you look at it game by game. Like, I do think that as this goes forward, if Detonator matures a bit more, I think they actually might take some games off James Cheese. Because if you just look, like, it is annihilation. It is like 7-1, 5-2, 4-0 James Cheese in pretty much every game leading up to hitting Detonator, and then suddenly the scores are closer. You have 3-0, 1-0, 3-2, 3-2. So it was not as much of a shutout as it looks if you just look at game wins. And that's also why I think that this other team, this Tough Love team, we might see some more interesting things from them as we go forward, because Detonator brought James Cheese down to a goal in most of their games, and Tough Love took Detonator to Game 7. So I know very little about any of this, but I think that it'll be interesting to see how. I think there's a lot of really interesting movement that's going to happen in that region, to be honest. Because I don't want there to be a James Cheese that's just so dominant they're completely untouchable.
Yeah.
Even though it's kind of cool, but that's not good Rocket League. That's not good for the fans to watch. Agree. But also, it would be if they do stay completely dominant and then they get to Worlds and they continue in that way. Because I feel kind of like that's what BDS did, right? BDS took Worlds they took Worlds, they won it, and they won it by absolutely just dominating G2. Is that correct? G2?
Yes, that was the grand final was G2 BDS.
Yeah, and like you look back through that as well, and like BDS was showing the whole time that they were going to be very dominant throughout the whole thing. And I think because Worlds was in the US, people didn't pay attention to BDS at all until they made this by, destroying G2. So maybe we'll see that again, because has Asia Pacific ever won a Worlds?
No, they have not. This will be... So actually, the last World Championships was the first time that they were allowed to compete.
Okay. Interesting.
So I mean, I think we are still waiting to see an Asia Pacific team make the main event. They did not this year.
Well, now I'm gonna root for James Cheese.
Yeah, there we go.
That's friggin' cool. All right. Well, this is fun.
Yeah, well, I think we've officially talked everyone's ear off, so we will let you guys go for today.
Yeah, get out of here.
Yeah, we will be back next week with some wrap up from EU, SAM, and Sub-Saharan Africa.
Dude, I am pretty excited because I'm just excited to see what comes out of Sub-Saharan Africa. To be honest, as I said, I've not paid attention to the pro scene. I didn't even realize that that was a region that would have Rocket League teams. So I really am excited to see how that all goes.
Yeah, me too. So, without further ado, thank you guys for listening, and we will catch you later.
Go touch grass.
Thank you for listening to the Boost Over Ball podcast.